Everybody, welcome to another installment of Show to V with Mike G, the show of life, the show of proto-punk, DC, politics, Tibet, and Hudson Whiskey. Yes, that's right. Today we talk to the enigmatic, the persona, the world-renowned personality, Mr. Han Shan, National Ambassador of Hudson Whiskey. And no, I don't think that's his real name. That's how secretive the life before whiskey perhaps was. Or maybe it's just the greatest crafted personality, persona, brand ambassador role that you can imagine. Han and I got to sit down at the San Antonio Cocktail Conference and sip through some of those fine Hudson whiskeys, that Hudson Manhattan Rye being an outstanding, exceptional rye whiskey, of which I would love a dram just about now. But we talk about a lot of different things. Of course, we dive into music. We dive into punk rock. We talk about the perils of being a political activist. We talk about filmmaking, and many other things. So I hope you guys enjoy this chat with the infamous Han Shan.
Reminiscing in a way, I mean, people are sharing in different ways. I feel like it's evolving very quickly because so many people are partaking in this little thing. But the way I read it was the top 10 most influential artists and albums.
Right.
One album per artist.
Yeah.
Of your teenage years. So that's 13 to 19. It's very circumscribed.
That's
and most influential, because I found as I was trying to narrow it down to 10, there were things I listened to more than made the list. And there were some things that are on my list that I don't feel great about, but they were influential nonetheless.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Dude, 5150 Van Halen, I don't want to admit listening to that shit. But
well, it's so, for me, it was all about punk rock.
Yeah.
There were two things that weren't punk on my list, and that was Pink Floyd The Wall, which I feel like was honorary punk. For me, it's almost proto-punk. And then Public Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet, which was incredibly eye-opening and sort of educational for me as a white kid growing up in Baltimore in a very segregated city, understanding gentrification, understanding the politics of the black experience. So, and that just crept in at the end of my teenage years. But really, punk opened my eyes to politics, to the world in which we live, and
because we're talking so Baltimore guy, so close to DC.
Well, so exactly. So Minor Threat, Fugazi, but also on my list is Agent Orange and
what about GI?
Government Issue made my honorable mentions. Because I had to leave a little room for some honorable mentions.
That's amazing.
But there were those albums or songs that were on this mixtape that opened my eyes to punk and definitely were transformative and influential, that weren't necessarily the best things or my favorite things, but they were
impactful?
Forks in the road.
Influential
and impactful in that way. Yeah.
So as a kid, it's funny because I can go backwards. I can say, all right, well, here are the records. So let's build a guy. What's this guy? What's this guy look like? Were you a skater kid? Were you a biker kid?
I was into BMX, but really, I didn't really see myself as a skater or a biker per se. I had a very, very dear friend named Christian Sturgis, who I literally was talking with in the comments about this mixtape that we spent the summer between 6th and 7th grade literally walking around our neighborhood blasting this mixtape on a boombox.
Yeah.
It
those
was
D
it
batteries,
was like,
right? Like
it
the
was
massive
the
battery.
Meatmen and
gosh.
some really stuff that I'm actually embarrassed about now.
Really?
But also Fear and Violent Femmes and just some great stuff, some funny stuff, but some stuff that opened our eyes. And I think I was definitely educated by punk.
Yeah.
Punk music.
Kind of connection to the outside world in a way, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
You know, you're 13 years old, 12, 13 years old. We felt very protected. I, grew up in North Baltimore, edge of the suburbs, but still a very white, very kind of, an experience a little bit away from the Baltimore that people who, watch The Wire.
Right. Not as gritty.
No, not as gritty. But at the same time, my mom worked at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and so
what did she do there?
she was a nurse. I mean,
Straight up, yeah.
literally
My
a
mom
nurse.
too,
I mean,
yeah.
she would come home with stories from the ER that were kind of horrific, and we weren't allowed to talk about money, religion, or politics at the dinner table, but she would tell us about like murder victims.
But everything
so it was
else
kind
is
of like,
fine.
yeah, really, Mom? That's I guess just because she was a little numb to it.
Let punk rock teach me. That's fine.
Yeah,
Let me learn about politics.
It
from
actually
you and Kai,
was.
yeah?
It was so important to me, and I feel like I'm so thankful, actually, to that. I'm just very grateful for the experience of growing up around East Coast, particularly like DC punk.
It's a great time.
The whole kind of discord, straight edge, political, positive punk.
Did you have amazing time? I missed it just slightly,
Well, I know. I'm 44. You can see with my gray hair.
No, dude, I have more gray hair in my chin than you do, I think.
Mid-'80s.
But that was a great time.
For sure.
When it came to drugs and it came to alcohol and all that stuff, of which it was a really strong straight edge movement, did you relate one way or the other with it?
Initially, I did. I'll be honest. I was sort of attracted to the straight edge thing only in that the way I understood it was really more about being positive and taking control of one's life. And I saw I think I was skeptical of the messages of the consumerist messages that we saw. Just kind of numb yourself. You can get away from the world's problems by drowning it in alcohol or drugs or whatever. And I saw it even amongst my peers, of course, just people kind of wanting to hide behind a veneer of numbness, whatever it was that kind of made it easy to not look at the world. As I grew up, and it wasn't too long before I was able to see things in more gray tones.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're
that's how
really young, exactly. I was attracted to the idea, Ian MacKaye, out of step. The lyrics are, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I can't keep up, I'm out of step with the world. I was attracted to the idea that you would literally reject these things that in an era right before that, those were seen as rebellious, like to do drugs or to drink.
Absolutely, free love, right?
And now he was saying, no, come on. Rebellion is being crystal clear, engaging with the world, seeing it, straight on. That's what straight edge was about.
Yeah.
So I was attracted to that, and then as I got a little older, I was like, hey, I like this whiskey stuff.
Booze is not so bad.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Because there's so much legacy and so much tradition and so much heritage and so much fun and stories and storytelling and, rebellion to be had too, and cocktail culture and, so...
I'm sure you'll find that it's an undercurrent that doesn't go away.
Exactly.
Rebellion, punk, just the punk mentality.
Right.
Do things in their own kind of way, like put whiskey in a 375.
Right. Yes, exactly.
That's something, right? Not to a lesser extent, it's not changing the world, but it is a punk movie. It really is.
For sure.
So as you kind of grew up, it seems like maybe some activism, but when it comes to what it was crystal clear in the 80s, you go to college, you get a degree, you get a great job. That straight, narrow path. Mm-hmm. Was that for you?
No. No. I went to art school. I studied painting.
What medium or what kind of paint did you like?
I mean, I was an oil painter, but I did everything. I did sculpture. I did performance and video, and I messed around all over the place. I did printmaking and photograph.
Anybody particularly influential at that point for you?
I mean, don't get me started. We go down a whole nother path.
But I
mean, I was doing big kind of abstract work, but I saw it as narrative. I saw it as kind of emotionally resonant. So I was very attracted to some of the big abstract expressionists. I mean, Rothko and
I was gonna. How do you feel about Newman? I thought it was a little flat, right?
I'm more to me. There's Roscoe people and Barnett Newman.
That's
people,
right.
And the one place where I feel like it comes together in a really beautiful way is not too far from here in Houston at the Roscoe Chapel.
That's
where
right. Yeah.
you have the broken obelisk sculpture by Barnett Newman outside of the beautiful Roscoe Chapel. And that, to me, and the fact that they were friends, that sort of helped me understand it.
Yeah.
Because, frankly, Barnett Newman never did a thing for me.
Yeah, I don't like it either. It's pretty flat,
I liked its idea. The Stations of the Cross at the National Gallery it's a cool idea, but then I actually look at the paintings and they fall utterly flat for me somehow. But anyway. It's a piece of you, that artistic motivation, that drive. For sure.
Yeah.
And that idea that you can look at something and the narrative behind it, just like so much poetry or, punk expression, whether it's in music or fashion, there's depths to it that you can plumb. That it's, what you see is, there's a lot more beneath the surface.
Absolutely.
And so I think for me, punk was part of that, and the way that I pursued art and painting was definitely part of that.
Was there a clear signpost, a clear mile marker that you were trying to achieve with your work?
Honestly, when I started out, I wanted to be a studio artist. I figured maybe I'd teach, but I wanted to, show in galleries and sell my work. And as I got into my early 20s, and I was relatively successful actually as a young man. I had some gallery shows and I did all right. I had a bit of an existential crisis when I realized that the be-all, end-all of that life was just selling decoration to wealthy folks. And
if you took it literally, right?
Yeah. I think, and I was being more and more engaged politically, and I sort of felt, well, I didn't want to do that, and I was an activist as well. I was sort of always involved from kind of my teenage years with the awakening of punk.
Right.
And I was living in Chicago where I went to school, the Art Institute of Chicago. And I frankly kind of stepped back from pursuing the art career that I might have had. And for the next, frankly, 20 years until I came around to work for Hudson Whiskey. Literally, for 20 years I worked in nonprofit human rights and environmental advocacy.
That's amazing.
So,
did you travel around a bit for that?
I traveled a lot. A lot of my work was focused on kind of the intersection of human rights and resource extraction. Mm-hmm. So, looking at the way oil, gas, mining, timber, and other kinds of resource extraction affects indigenous communities in the Amazon. I worked with Tibetan refugees and Tibetans in the human rights and really the independence struggle in Tibet. And I've traveled a lot, and it's still stuff that I'm involved in.
Right.
The truth of the matter is, over those 20 years, as enriched as I became, never made a lot of money. That's not the point. That never was the point.
Right.
I was always, or at least over the last decade or more, I've been nerdy about cocktails and spirits and going and visiting distilleries and all that good stuff. And I was very enamored with the industry and wanted to find a way to make that part of my experience. And when I got an opportunity to make that my job, I feel like I've sort of switched my passion and my livelihood. But the cool part is they're really, I have a passion for what I do now for a living.
Right.
I have a passion for what I did for a living before, and now I do it as a volunteer, and I still find ways to participate.
Because there's the human element is really important here. Talk about the human toll. Mezcal always comes to mind because there's a massive cultural impact to the people. Once the West comes in, man, heads will roll.
Absolutely.
So as you were in this period, because this is good. This is easy for me. Art, activism, whiskey.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
I know.
Three bookends.
I knew
chapters.
we'd
this is
pull this all together.
Yeah, it's so good. And there's 3 bottles, so this is actually very, very perfect. But in that process of following the causes, documenting them too, I'm kind of assuming.
Yeah, yeah.
In which way, I'm not sure whether it was camera or film or whatnot.
A little bit of all. But
A little bit all of it.
Yeah.
Were you able, so this is the thing, sometimes when we chase this passion, right, whether it's art, whiskey too, to a degree,
Yeah.
it comes at the stake of our personal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to still build really, really deep bonds in Chicago while you're out doing those things for other people?
I mean, yes. When I said I was enriched by my work, even if I wasn't socking money away in my savings account,
Yeah.
I mean, I really, I can't even describe how wealthy I feel in terms of the experiences, but more than anything, the incredible relationships I've forged with people around the world over the years. And I see it in this industry. I see it sort of, I certainly see it in the cocktail world and in the world of craft distillers and in just the broader kind of booze industry that I'm now a part of, for sure. But I just can't say enough about the relationships. You know, when you're fighting literally together on the front lines with people on life and death stuff. You know, I've got friends who, when I look back on it now, I realize, I spent maybe a few weeks with this person 15 years ago on this one particular project, but we forged a bond where now, literally, if I heard that person needs me,
you're there.
I'd buy a ticket and be on their doorstep tomorrow morning.
Band of brothers kind of thing, in a sense,
without
right?
a doubt.
Yeah.
And I know that there's more people than I can count who would do that for me.
Yeah.
And that's humbling as hell.
Absolutely.
And frankly, it's happened. I mean, it's been proven.
Yeah.
And I try not to take that for granted, because there's nothing more important than that in the world.
People.
Yeah.
Always. And you're right, those relationships.
Yeah.
I can think of some of the things that perhaps were going around in the world globally, some problems, some apartheid, whatever it may be. Can you tell me about one of the places you really went to, traveled, and immersed yourself in that you really, really enjoyed the actual place itself?
Yeah. I mean,
away from the violence, right? I'm trying to take it in a different direction. Yeah.
Of course. I mean, I think a lot of the work that I did with Students for a Free Tibet and the broader Tibetan struggle, and I mean, I was involved. I volunteered the Tibetan Freedom Concerts way back.
I remember, man.
That was another one of those conversations. Literally on Facebook, I was chatting today with a buddy who was involved with the Miller Epa Fund, who put on the Tibetan Freedom Concerts.
Yeah.
His top 10 records from his teenage years. I was sort of thinking about him. But I traveled to Tibet, and really it was a bit sketchy. It was a kind of a research trip where we were going to look at human rights abuses, and specifically what was happening at Dropchi prison outside of Lhasa.
Yeah.
And we were being surveilled, but this is also quite some time ago, so it wasn't as if there was all the social media and Facebook, and so we were able to get in.
Yeah.
We were able to go on tourist visas. We were able to sort of take advantage of a very brief opening that the Chinese government facilitated for some press and whatnot. They were still watching very, very closely, but I had a few moments. I mean, some days where we traveled and visited some monasteries and talked to some folks where we were very nervous, frankly, because we didn't want we didn't want to have any interactions that would come back and haunt the people who interacted with us.
Right.
Unbeknownst to them, that they were talking to activists or whatever. But we had some incredible just conversations, and we were traveling in one of the most beautiful places on the planet. You just can't even imagine.
Is it peaceful?
How epic.
To contrast what we know is the human rights violations at that point.
I mean, that's the hard part, is so much of the kinds of oppression and the religious persecution, of course, but also the cultural control that the Chinese government asserts over everyday Tibetans experience. It's always just beneath the surface, and you don't have to scratch very deep to find it, and it'll come bubbling up. So you see it, and sometimes you'll be in an idyllic little courtyard in a monastery, and you'll think, wow, this is the most enlightened, beautiful place, and you can turn a corner, and there's guys with machine guns, and I had this one experience at this particular monastery where we were being given a tour by a monk, and this is not an official tour.
Right,
this is not a place where you can go visit. We just showed up on the doorstep, and monk kind of took us down into these catacombs, deep into the sort of bowels of this monastery, took us to this altar, and he's showing us this altar, and I'm speaking like the worst pidgin Tibetan that I can.
Yeah.
He's got a few English words, and he pulls this, I forget what it was, whether it was another picture or a bowl or something out of the way to show that there was a picture of His Holiness the Dalai Lama that they had sort of hidden. And he kind of, because literally images of the Dalai Lama are forbidden and can get folks in a lot of trouble. But he pulled it aside just to show us and kind of winked. And then he pushed the picture and the bowl back in front of it, just to sort of show, he wanted to actually show off, like, hey, we're still doing our thing here. And he was sort of, it was after, an hour of building trust just as two humans, and he had no reason really to trust us, but I think he wanted to show that, hey, we're still resisting. Yeah. We still have our traditions. We still believe what we believe.
It's the punk rock nod.
It is, without a doubt.
Yeah. It's kind of like, no, I can hang.
Yeah.
Look at this.
Totally.
Right? It's really brilliant. It's a lovely thing to think about how enriched your life's become from traveling and just being around people, and just, they're interesting, man. Yeah. Always. People, that's like the greatest part of this planet.
Yeah.
The people. And it's the worst part, too.
I also got to enjoy a virgin cocktail that most folks will never have, which is yak butter tea.
Oh my gosh!
Which is a Tibetan delicacy. I'm not going to call it a delicacy. It's an everyday drink up on the high steppes in the plateau of Tibet, where it's obviously cold. There's a limited amount of things grow there. They make incredible use of yak dairy. And yak butter tea, it's basically a black tea that they mix, not really like a tea that you've ever had. It's more like a soup, but it's basically tea mixed with melted butter and some salt. And, it's the kind of thing that'll get a nomadic herder through a long, cold day.
Yeah.
And I have to say that the first couple sips were a little tough to choke down. And then I sort of got it. I turned a corner, and I was like, wow, this is amazing.
That's incredible.
The technology in this cocktail to keep people healthy and hearty in a pretty tough climate.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into, we're going to talk about this transition, your maybe fondness of food and these kinds of things. But what do you think of the three Hudson whiskeys we have in front of us? What's a good way to start this?
Well, we're going to start, for folks who are only listening and not tasting, if of course you have a little Hudson whiskey handy or a little bourbon of any sort, you can drink along. But I'm going to pour you a little baby bourbon. This is our first. We begin where Tuttletown Spirits and Hudson Whiskey began, with a little baby bourbon, the very first bourbon ever made in New York.
Wow. What year are we talking?
So Tuttletown Spirits starts up in 2003.
Okay.
This first came off the stills in about 2005.
Wow.
And it was probably on the shelf in about 2006 when our founder, Ralph Arenzo, really a pioneer in the craft spirit space, as I'm sure you know, starts taking us down to New York, literally in the back of his truck.
Yeah.
Telling people, hey, this is this bourbon I made,
what do New Yorkers know about bourbon?
Well,
that's a good question, right?
There were a few New Yorkers who did, including Linnell Smothers, who was running Linnell's in Red Hook, this great little whiskey shop, who was our very, very first customer, Hudson Whiskey's first customer. And when Ralph showed this whiskey off to her, she said, "Yeah, all right, I'll buy everything that you have." And literally, he was like, "Well, okay, that's only a handful of bottles, but I'm going to go right back to the still and keep making it." But yeah, we're talking 2005, so it's only been about a dozen years. But this is an all-corn bourbon, and one of the most important things, of course, about this bourbon, but also about the ethos of what makes Hudson Whiskey different and a pioneer, is, of course, this is all made from local grain, grown in the Hudson Valley, grown in New York. So
it's very lovely. Salud.
Cheers.
I've had Hudson before, but this kind of experience, you know how when you have a drink and under certain situations and conditions, it's so much better. So this is, sharing a drink with you, mate, this is really lovely.
Right on. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm adding a little splash of water just because this is non-chill filtered. And so,
what proof are we running here?
It's 92 proof. And so that's the proof at which essentially the fatty acids, the oils that are in there coming off the still will stay in solution. It won't gum up and get cloudy. And so we don't have to chill filter. And of course, distillers chill filter essentially for the sake of the consumer who's afraid that, they see the cloudy whiskey bottle and they think it's broken.
Right.
We don't, and at 92 proof, essentially, you don't need to. And so when you add water, there's chemistry going on. It's not just a matter of opening it up. But yeah, sure, that's a great way of talking about opening it up. But really, those fatty acids are hydrophobic. You add water, and you're actually unlocking them, and they kind of they'll bloom. You can see those oils sort of curdle up. There should be a better word than curdle.
I like it though. It's good. Congeal. No, it's a worse.
No, yeah, exactly. But you actually will taste new things. You'll taste a little citrus. You'll taste a little more vanilla, and some of those things that are just kind of hidden until you add that little splash of water.
When you think of whiskey, so the thing that's interesting to me is, I don't see how, if I was throwing a dart at a board, how your previous work. Now, art, I get. That kind of makes sense. How in the hell that would parlay into a whiskey gig? Now, but we will talk about that story for sure. But that, to me, it's like almost disjointed,
no, but
in a brilliant way.
It's honestly, here's the thing. So for 20 years, I'm doing this work that, I tell you, and it's true, that so fulfilling.
Yeah.
But also emotional and overwhelming and difficult and challenging at times. And quite frankly,
it's a lot to carry on your
a nice glass of whiskey at the end of the day, or three, became a real solace. And it going way back. I mean, I come from a family who's always enjoyed whiskey, so it was always around, and I always enjoyed it. But over the years, I really developed an abiding love for bourbon, first and foremost, just as an American whiskey guy and as a member of my family where there was always bourbon in the house. And it's really also, I think, been over the last 10, 15 years, and it's really interesting to be here at San Antonio Cocktail Conference. We're in this incredible time where, there's more information than there's ever been before in terms of books, podcasts, social media, all these personalities you can follow on Twitter and Instagram. And I mean, there was the sort of period where cocktail blogs were just exploding, and there's still so many great resources out there. I was one of those civilians, frankly, who,
I like that.
Yeah, I wasn't in the industry, but I was on this side of the bar enjoying it. I was loving learning about it. And, it's been in the last decade where a civilian, somebody who's just an enthusiast, an amateur at home, can really immerse themselves and go out, and if they're as enthusiastic as I was, and there's lots of folks here this week who are.
You can hear them right now, in fact.
Right? Yeah, I know, exactly. You can go to workshops, you can go visit distilleries on holiday, you can read all the books, you can go to tastings with distillers. You can nerd out to your heart's content, and I did. And so there came a time when I felt like I could flip that, livelihood and hobby.
Yeah.
And frankly, more than anything, I was so attracted to Hudson Whiskey from early on because of the ethos of the company,
Yeah.
which I think is super punk rock. I mean, I don't know if Ralph Lorenzo would say that he's punk rock from a slightly different generation, but so much of the company's ethos has been about bucking trends, about doing what people said was impossible, about being just tenacious, about following one's dreams and passions. And, I just thought he was cool as shit and made this awesome product that didn't make any sense, that people said wouldn't work. I mean, I really was earnestly a fan. And so now, even though I didn't come from a bartending background or whatever, I serve as the ambassador as a fan. I'm just talking to people about this thing that I really dug. And now I get a chance to proselytize about this thing that I was enjoying,
So I can't imagine, when did you put your hat in the ring to be one of the guys for contention? Or was there another brand?
Well, no. And
Always
that's the thing.
right?
I got to be honest. There was not another brand. I don't get me wrong. I am a promiscuous whiskey drinker. I enjoy lots of other brands and not just whiskey. I really enjoy this industry, and I enjoy the opportunity to try all the stuff out there. But my predecessor in this role was Ralph's son, Gable, who's a very good friend now. And, he came to work at the distillery with his dad from very, very early on. And he became sort of the default ambassador. When he wasn't in the still house, he was on the road proselytizing like I do now and sharing Hudson whiskey with the masses and going and visiting bartenders and all that good stuff that we do. But, he did that for a bunch of years informally. Then he did it formally when William Grant invested in Tuttletown, took on the Hudson Whiskey brand. He became officially the Hudson Whiskey ambassador. Then he did that for another 4 years.
He
did it for years.
Is he a younger guy?
He's a younger guy than me.
Oh.
I don't know how old Gable is. Well, I should know. He just had his birthday. I want to say he's 35, 36.
Oh, something good.
Yeah. No, and he's been doing phenomenal things lately. He's back distilling in Gardner. But that was the thing. After being on the road for a bunch of years doing it, he wanted to come home. He wanted to spend more time with his wife, Kathy, who's just a fantastic woman. And he wanted to invest in Tuttletown for a while, and now he's got his own thing, Gardner Liquid Mercantile, where he's distilling fruit eau de vie and literally making stuff in the back.
That's fine.
That's lame.
You have a phone?
Yeah,
How dare you have a phone?
He's distilling stuff in the back that he's literally selling out the front.
That's
which
amazing.
Is, very, very cool, and it's really an extension of what his dad pioneered in terms of the Farm Distillery Act and this legislation that helped promote using local products in New York. So anyway, he wanted to get off the road, and Hudson Whiskey did a call out. Literally,
I saw about
do you want
that,
to come be the next ambassador, take over for Gable? And I put my hat in the ring, and I got lucky.
What did you have to compose to put your hat in the ring?
Well, so I mean,
is it a video? Is that what I saw?
They made a whole kind of social media. I mean, it was a campaign. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
It was a really innovative way of conducting a search where they essentially invited people to make a video. You had to create an online profile through the little platform that they built, write an essay, and then invite your friends to come essentially vote for you. Not like it wasn't based on those votes, but come get your friends on social media to root for you as you go through this process. And there were various rounds. So it went from some 280 or something, I forget exactly, down to 88, and then
Lord,
12
people,
and then there were 3 finalists, and the 3 finalists we basically went up to Tuttletown Distillery and had a distillery residency for a few weeks where we learned the ropes, and we did everything. I mean,
cool.
Milled, mashed, fermented, distilled.
Yeah.
We filled barrels,
proofed, bottled, all of it,
every
dude,
bit of it, and it was a blast. And frankly, it was the kind of thing I probably would have paid to do if the opportunity hadn't come in this way. At another time in my life, if I had the money, to take 2 weeks off, and instead I got paid 2 weeks and won a job of a lifetime out of it.
So if you can take a step back and you think about that whole process, which to me, it's that you had such a social presence is good, and I congratulate you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
As a piece. To ponder on yourself and your set of skills. Why you? Why do you think they picked you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like they definitely took a chance, and I don't think many brands would. Yeah. I think it says something about Hudson Whiskey. I think it says something about Ralph and Gable and Brian and the team at Tuttletown, who were always willing to take a chance. But it also says something about William Grant and Sons, because at the end of the day, it was this family-owned company. It's not such a small company in the grand scheme of things that had the ultimate say. And they took a chance. It's obviously it's still a small brand. It's growing and it's doing great, and we feel great about it. But I think it was where Hudson was, that it had been in the great hands of Gable, whose dad co-founded it with his partner Brian Lee, and so there was room there. It wasn't like there was a long succession or there was a whole group of ambassadors that had held the position before.
I think they've got an eye for talent. That's what I think.
Well, thank you. I suppose I think one of the fun things looking back was most of the people who really were rooting for me on Facebook and tweeting and commenting on Instagram, doing all this good stuff that I think helped get some attention. They were all a lot of my activist friends who kind of knew I was a little burnt out, and they knew and
they know how to support a cause, don't they?
Without a doubt. And I had turned them on to a lot of good drinking, and I've always brought the cocktails to the fundraising party. I had helped a lot of them put together nice home bars over the years, and I think they were just getting me back.
Karmic, man. Yeah. Totally karmic. All right.
Sure.
Well, let's try the second one of your pick, and I want to talk about the road after this.
Of course.
The long and winding road.
So I'm going to pour you a little Manhattan Rye.
Okay.
Hudson Manhattan Rye. Now, I said the baby bourbon was literally the very first bourbon made in New York. Pre-Prohibition, nobody had made bourbon. But folks had made plenty of rye.
Oh, of course.
In New York. And in the Northeast and Pennsylvania and Maryland. But this is the first rye whiskey made in New York after Prohibition, because Tuttletown Spirits, of course, was the first distillery to start up after Prohibition. That's part of Ralph and Brian's legacy to have created this distillery where there hadn't been anyone making whiskey for 70 years.
Wow.
But what I love about this rye whiskey is it really harks back to those pre-Prohibition style rye whiskeys. You get lots of spice and certainly has a grainy quality, but then you'll see it's not just, I think a lot of folks are intimidated by rye whiskey. They think it's just going to be heat.
Right.
It's got that cracked pepper spice right up front, but then you'll see it mellows into more fruit and still plenty of spice, but more like baking spice, cinnamon.
Once you get to know her.
Absolutely.
She's quite lovely, huh?
Indeed. And, of course, called Manhattan Rye, partly to sort of pay homage to the island and lay claim to the New York heritage that this stuff represents, but, of course, also to remind people of Manhattan. Proper Manhattan is made with rye whiskey.
Yeah, sorry, that twist at the end, that was a very, very unexpected twist. Sweet and cinnamon just popped into the end.
Without a doubt, little mint, little kind of menthol.
It's great.
Cooling thing
it's
on
cool,
that dry finish.
It starts where you think, but it certainly doesn't end up where you think.
Exactly.
That's really, really brilliant. What's the proof on this guy?
Cheers. Again, 92 proof.
Good.
It's kind of our sweet spot across
just so
the portfolio.
It doesn't luge, right?
Indeed.
So talking about the road then, you're a man who's traveled the world, probably been in really perilous situations, stuff that's incredibly, your life's been on the line a couple times, I'd imagine, yeah? Yeah. It's funny. I was trying to think about which story to tell you about. A place that I travel and aside from the peril that was also really beautiful and honestly one of the more dangerous places, sadly, and to this day, Afghanistan. Yeah.
I've been in Afghanistan a few times, and most recently, and I'd love to go back, but it's been 2007, I guess I was there last, and in Kabul, but then traveled up north into Badakhshan, and that is a place where obviously, I mean, peril at every turn, and certainly in the wrong areas, and being an American. But at the same time, the Pashtunwali, the people have talked about the Pashtun kind of concept of hospitality. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this is an industry where we're obsessed with talking about hospitality and trends in hospitality. Well, 2,000 plus years of hospitality as a deep and abiding philosophy for the Pashtun people basically means that, you know, an enemy could walk up and knock on somebody's door. I mean, a real enemy. Yeah. And if they were seeking just a place to spend the night, they'd let you in. They'd probably make you tea. They'd put you in a corner and give you a blanket. And when you're walking out the door, they say, "Don't come back, or I will kill you."
Oh my God!
You know, but in that moment, they will literally. I mean,
selfless, very, very.
It just
comforting.
This deep, moral, ethical, religious, all of the above, woven together, braided together philosophy of hospitality that is about honor, and I experienced that in Afghanistan in a way that, I mean, some of the poorest people that I've ever come across who would literally give you the shirt off their back. But beyond that, beyond all the cliches, also just a really beautiful place with lovely people who like to laugh and have wicked funny, great senses of humor and great music and food, and, you know, just...
We see it different here, don't we?
Yeah.
We have a very
we just don't see
lens.
enough oftentimes.
Yeah.
The channels, we are filled with static, and
right.
and so we're not always getting the clearest picture.
So now that you have this, trying to transition gently, right? From it's like,
yes.
well, it's
yes. As I raise a whiskey to the people of Afghanistan for all the hospitality that I've enjoyed.
I noted that it's what I've experienced in Mexico, right? So it's the same. It's this kind of DNA that is in a lot of people where they just want to be polite. They want to take care of each other.
Sure.
And then once that's done, once the formalities are out of the way, you disagree with me? Get the fuck out of here. Right?
No
There's
doubt.
the door. Jog on, mate.
Yeah.
But so you're traveling a lot,
and
you get to talk about this thing that you love. Are you? I think this is a really easy answer. How comfortable are you with going in front of a room of people you don't know, getting on a stage, so to speak, and talking about whiskey, talking about Hudson?
I mean, again, speaking of things that I just can't take for granted, the fact that people will let me get up on a stage and wax about whiskey. I mean, are you kidding me? Yeah. You know, I will get that rush of adrenaline and nervousness and my hand will shake, but it's become second nature. It's what we do, and I do enjoy it. I think the important part is that my job, and I feel like the best of my colleagues and peers in this industry, our job isn't just to present and educate and speak from on high. It's to convene and host and provide hospitality and get people together and throw a party and make people feel comfortable and hopefully broaden people's horizons. So, you know, if I can do that, I mean, it's just a blast. Are you kidding me?
Did you ever perform kind of when you were younger? Did you
I was in a band.
Thing?
Yeah, I was in a punk band.
I'm trying to think. Let me see. What would you play? You're too creative.
Singer.
Okay, good. Not a drummer because you're too creative.
Yeah. No, I sang in a punk band. You know,
later known as Green Day, if I recall.
No, yeah, no. Come on, Billy Joe. But no, just pretty small. It'd be hard to find anything. But we were called the Fifth Column. And so yeah, you know, I've been on some stages over the years, and feels. I mean I think that's one thing to go back to what William Grant and Hudson Whiskey and Tuttletown and Brian and Ralph and Gable and all these folks were looking for in an ambassador. I think they weren't looking for a wallflower, that's for sure. So part of our job is to try to walk into any room and feel comfortable enough to talk to anybody. And I think, in some ways, and believe me, I look at some of my colleagues and some of my peers out there doing the work that I'm doing, and I'm just bowled over and have so much, and I'm envious and I'm intimidated by
who's someone you're a fan of? Sorry to stop you and talk there. But
well, let me just finish my point, which is just to simply say that, I think that folks are there's so much good work being done out there. I didn't know that I was sort of in training for what I'm doing now, but I feel like I look back and I realize that a lot of what I did for many, many years kind of led up to a bundle of skills that make me, I'm not going to say that they make me a good ambassador. I do my best every day, but they make me comfortable doing this, and they make me comfortable walking into a room filled with diverse people I've never met who may or may not like whiskey, may or may not like my politics, may or may not like where I'm from, may or may not like my face. It doesn't matter. And I can hopefully walk in and pour some drinks and have everybody, including myself, laughing by, the end of whatever time we have together. And that's, I think, probably the most important skill, is to be able to talk to anybody.
I think so,
meet them where they are, right?
Are there any living legends in this ambassador field that you look at?
I mean, this is almost too easy, but Charlotte Boise,
that's easy. Yeah,
I know, but and perhaps not controversial enough. But the truth is, she's just such a class act, and she can do that. And I watch her, and I just think she's tremendous, and she's also kind of been a mentor, and she's one of those people. I know, even though no one's, she was certainly helping make the decision to bring me on board, and the fact that she was willing to take a chance on me was humbling. You know what I mean?
It is always when someone recognizes you that you so respect. I mean, it's like one of those lovely, warm feelings.
Because she was also one of those people, along with some, like Dave Wondrich in terms of just the history and the writing, and Dale DeGroff just in terms of, being King Cocktail.
Right.
She was one of those people who I was following as a social media personality, as somebody who I watched their videos and read the stuff. She was somebody who I was like, oh, that's so
She was
cool.
on Iron Chef, man.
Yeah.
That's exactly. That was the thing. Her and Tony Abu Gaiman, I was like, these guys I got to know.
Yeah.
This was even years ago. But yes, I heard a story about her the other night. I mean, this is a great thing, and I was talking to another person.
I can neither confirm nor deny. I don't know
where this is going. Totally uncontroversial, I promise you.
All right.
So she'll head out at 8 p.m. so she can make it in bed and run in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
That is insanely perfect. That's a great way to live the ambassador life.
Well, and that's, it's funny. I just saw her the afternoon before I came down here, and we were remarking about the fact that, this San Antonio Cocktail Conference lasts a long time.
Yeah.
And we were both experiencing some FOMO, really, wishing that we were here, just seeing all these folks posting stuff on Facebook and having so much fun. And she said, I know it's almost giving me FOMO, and I don't even do FOMO. Because it's true, after you do it for a while,
you got to know the boundaries, man.
Absolutely, and she's queen of the Irish exit. She just disappears in a puff of smoke, and you just don't know where she went. But God bless her, she's so classy, and everyone loves her, so she can just get away with it. Yeah. No one's going to give her a hard time either.
Never will,
because they know she's literally up the next morning, perhaps in a whole new city.
Yeah.
She may have literally flown at 6 o'clock that morning somewhere, and she's taking a run along the seashore in Charleston or something. Well, looking at dolphins, but yeah,
that's amazing. Well, so to talk about the last chapter, which I'll dub it the future.
Yes. Let's
punctuate with the last fine bottle that you've.
Of course, and this worked out nicely because I'm going to pour you a little of our maple cask rye, and of course this is an innovation. This is something that's kind of interesting and new, and it's not that new. It's been around. This is the fourth batch, but this is a seasonal release, a batch that we've done each year for the last 4 years. Essentially, our rye whiskey that has been aged in some barrels. Well, aged in new charred oak barrels.
Yeah.
And then transferred for a finish in barrels that were used to age maple syrup. So
no kidding.
Our baby bourbon barrels that we lend to a maple tapper in Vermont ages his maple syrup, sends them back, and we put our rye back in for just a finish. So not any added maple flavor or sugar or anything really. Just that finish kind of, inspired by great Finnish scotches, something like a Caribbean cask, Balvenie 14-year, where that maple just kind of rounds it.
That's right.
Gives it a hint of sweetness, but really just polishes it. It's not like you get it doesn't taste like maple syrup, and we don't want it to.
But you get the creaminess and that vanilla at the end of it. Right? That's where it's like, you get a handshake, pulled to a hug. That's exactly how it feels. It's very formal at the front, right? And then it's like,
cheers. I love that.
Yeah, that's why
I am so stealing that.
Please steal that. No, lovely, and it's the same proof as the other guys, just because that's the magic.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's really lovely.
Right on.
Gross.
I like that.
Yeah,
and this is one where you get a real nice payoff with just the added splash of water in that maple flavor will bloom just a little bit more. It's still subtle. We want it to be subtle. We don't want anything that would even resemble a maple flavored whiskey. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but for what we're trying to do, anyway, that water will allow that maple to come to the fore just a bit.
Subtle, but it's good.
Yeah.
Tasteful.
Cheers.
Artful. Cheers indeed. So how many years have you been in this role now?
A little over 2.5.
2.5 years.
2 3/4 now, I suppose. Coming up on 3 years. Yeah.
A lot of travel.
Yeah.
A lot of talking.
Yeah. New York is it's my home base, and it is Hudson Whiskey's backyard and our biggest market by far. And so I have an excuse to stay home a little bit more than some other national ambassadors who really have to be road warriors. But I also enjoy the travel. I do, and I enjoy being able to explore bars and cities. I mean, walking around a town like San Antonio,
cool.
It's such a cool town. And the River Walk and all the history and just the kind of mishmash of cultures here and the Mexican heritage. I mean, it's so cool. But Texas, Florida, California, these big markets where Hudson does well. Of course, I've got to pay homage. Got to do that work. It's a bunch of travel, but it's not insane. Yeah. Not compared to the way that I know some folks are out there on the road sometimes.
Traveling themselves into the grave, man.
Yeah, it boggles my mind, frankly. But yeah, I'm on to L.A. tomorrow, and from there to Seattle. So again, can't complain though, right?
It's not bad. Yeah. These are great cities.
I know, right?
It'd be different than like you're going to Pocatello, Idaho tomorrow. It's like nothing wrong with that, but
you're gonna get some hate mail from.
Let them throw potatoes at me. I don't care. I've spent some time in Pocatello, man. Come on. I used to live up around that area.
All right.
So this is the thing that's so interesting to me. So like a success story, this could be in a sense a TV movie, right? Punk kid turned artist, turned activist, turned whiskey aficionado, right? But are you going to document this stuff? Like whether there's a next chapter, and I'm sure there's so much more mileage left with Hudson, and they're going to do great new things, more innovation, and all that. But for you and to keep your creative mind at work, is an autobiography in store? And I do not think that's hyperbolic either. I assure you, you've lived a life. A lot of us have lived semi-lives. You've been a lot of places. You've seen a lot of shit go down. You know.
Well, I think we get an opportunity at a bunch of different lives if we do it right. I mean, and sometimes that can just be a bunch of kind of compartmentalized lives, or it just means living a very multifaceted life. Or sometimes it can literally mean kind of having some revolutions in one's life where you do one thing for a while and then you do a different thing for a while. And I guess I've always admired. I've known some people who've really had some, they were a poet, and then they were a farmer, and then they were a distiller, and then they were something else. And I feel pretty privileged. Well, I am privileged to have been able to kind of run at a bunch of different things. But really, I think with this, I truly feel like I'm doing my best to kind of highlight the legacy of Tuttletown, Ralph and Brian and Gable, and the team. That I really think that they've been such pioneers, and we didn't even talk about the passage of the Farm Distillery Act and sort of all the work that they've done to kind of advocate for just the craft distilling boom, this renaissance in craft spirits that we've seen rolling across the country, and the role that they have played within that. I'm having fun. I can't believe I get paid to sit here and talk to you and sip whiskey. But literally, this is me doing my job. So I try not to take it for granted, and I try to represent for some folks who I think have done the heavy lifting. You know what I mean? They've really done the heavy lifting.
It's on your back now, though, to carry,
now,
right?
Well, I just try to tell stories, and I try to represent the good work that I think that they've been doing already. With that, though, I think, this is a role in which we get to do some creative stuff. We get to exercise those muscles. So last year, we celebrated the 10th, last year, 2015, actually. In 2015, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of Hudson Whiskey. And we chose that date. 2013, of course, was the 10th anniversary of the distillery's founding. Yeah. But 2015 was the 10th anniversary of the first whiskey actually coming off the stills. And we had a big party up at the distillery, and William Grant let me make a little documentary about the craft distilling renaissance and about Ralph's advocacy for the Craft Distillery Act and about the different generations, the ones that came before, that it inspired Tuttletown, and the ones that have come after. I mean, now we're seeing, more still craft distilleries popping up all over the country to this day. And I was able to make this documentary. I mean, it's 17 minutes long. We didn't want it to be...
But that's good.
It's not a feature-length thing,
Sure.
but it's also not a 3-minute brand video.
Yeah.
It's what I think was an earnest exploration of this phenomenon. And I was able to travel around the country and speak to a bunch of distillers who were only willing to speak to me because of the good kind of graces with which they, hold for Ralph and Brian and Gable. And, so you can go visit the Hudson Whiskey YouTube page and see this thing. And that kind of stuff, that's part of my job. Again, I get to exercise those muscles, which is so fun.
Pretty fulfilling,
and I think that there'll be more of that for me.
Yeah.
Taking pictures and making documentaries and writing and speaking and storytelling.
It's amazing.
And drinking the good stuff that juice comes off. Yeah, exactly.
Well, so here's the last question, because I'm going to be really, really interested to see how you feel about this. You're at your favorite bar in the world. Don't know where that may be. Not even asking. Let's just say it's a place setting, right?
Sure.
You can pick. I'm loving this rye, so let's pick a bottle of the Hudson Rye.
Yeah.
You're sipping it. You can have a conversation and a sip of this rye with anybody, living or past. Who would you love to sit and have a conversation with?
Oh man. So that's tough because it literally it's based on mood, right?
That's right. Yeah. Much like the whiskey.
I think I'd like to sip a little, and that's I think if you had said the baby bourbon, or if you had said our corn, it might have elicited literally a different answer. I think I'd like to sip a little Manhattan Rye whiskey with E. Cummings.
E. Cummings. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I just want to hear his poetic voice just in a dusty bar room with a little rye whiskey, kind of
groveling,
changing it, making it, roughing it up a little bit.
I think that'd be lovely.
First answer, best answer, right? So I'll stick
always.
with it.
It's brilliant, mate.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing the Hudson stuff.
Truly my pleasure.
Willie G's. I love working with you guys and chatting with you guys.
Right.
Brilliant bunch of numbskulls.
Yeah,
and personalities.
Without a doubt.
Han, it's been a pleasure, man.
Hey,
talk
cheers.
soon. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, there we have it. Hudson Whiskey's Han Shan, an enigmatic guy. It seems like he's lived 2 lives, the pre-whiskey life, and now traveling the United States and the world, speaking the praises of Hudson Whiskey. Hudson Whiskey has come a profoundly long way in terms of flavor, complexity, and maturity. And again, it's all the SKUs were really, really good, and it was great to sit down and sip those. But that Manhattan Rye is just something out of this world. It blew me away. I tried it years ago, and now it seems like they've upgraded to the full 53-gallon barrels, and that has made a world of difference. Han is an amazing guy, and I know there are far more tales to tell than what we sat down and chatted. So I hope you guys get a chance to chat with Han and kind of get to feel the worldliness and the experienced and almost gritty nature of the guy, but yet so peaceful, harmonious, and really, really down to earth. So thanks everybody for listening to Show to V with Mike G. No matter what your thoughts are on cachaça and how oak can impart so much great flavor, or when you're looking forward to getting the new 750 milliliter version of the Hudson Manhattan Rye, please keep dancing.